Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today I want to talk to you really quick about the memory boosts and if they are good or bad for Digimon and what do they promote. Now, before I get into it, obviously leave a like, comment, and follow us. We're on Instagram. I'm also on Rumble, and we are also here on YouTube. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, basically, what am I talking about with the memory boost? So, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of hard too. Memory boosts were put into the game at BT5. They were released in the Gallop, or we received them at least in the Gallantmon and All Force Futuremon structure decks. And what these were meant to do were to help boost consistency in each of the colored decks by allowing us to search the top 4 cards of our decks and basically add one corresponding Digimon of that color to our hand, and then as a delay, which is basically the effect after the card sits on the field, we would gain 2 memory by sending this card to the trash. Now, at the start of when these were released, I think this was massively useful because a lot of decks didn't have the consistency pieces they need. Believe it or not, there was a time that a lot of Digimon decks actually didn't have a check the top 3 or 4 cards of your deck to look for something. That was actually something that was kind of foreign to many of the strategies. The only way to really gain advantage in search was to either digivolve and or have one of these rookies if your deck offered it, or in the other way, have your tamers either search for something in something like TK that could look through the security, or you'd have to just simply hope out or use effects to keep drawing. Like in blue, there'd be additional draw effects. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is that the memory boosts at that time were actually very fair. I don't think there was anything that said that they wouldn't be because, like I said, decks were slower. They needed the search power. Brings us all the way into the BT7 format, where this starts to become a little bit more of a difficult thing. We received more memory boosts, and in the case of arguably the most powerful hybrid deck of the time, Blue Hybrids, they used both the Howling memory boost and the Blue memory boost. Now, the reason why I want to talk about the memory boost is not really necessarily their longevity in the game, because I think they're always going to have a place. This is more of a problem that I think a lot of players are talking about now, which is Digimon actually like a solitaire based game, or is it actually interactive? I still believe that it's mostly interactive. However, I can see the argument for it being more of a solitaire type of game. And the first instances we start to see this of is actually with, I would say, Blue Hybrid. Because once the deck was completely set up effectively with its tamers and basically having enough of the memory boost set up, it could go for lethal assaults. Now, even with the banning of Mega Digimon Fusion, that card essentially allowed them to go into Susanomon, which was very unfair because it would allow them to basically go into it for 0, and it would do lots of checks and basically be a very impressive card. Now, even with that card out of the meta and them not actually using Susanomon as well, the deck was still extremely powerful. I remember seeing people set up their tamers, set up their memory boosts, and basically do something that we would see in later formats, where they would just pop their memory boosts slowly and then start to swing and then use their hybrids for game, as the 2 memory was enough to get that evo up, and then they could just keep swinging slowly as long as they had the resources for it. That's also one of those checks and balances I think a lot of people kind of ignored from that format, is that although yes, the deck was really powerful, it was somewhat balanced, because if you didn't have enough resources, you weren't able to capitalize on either the use of your memory boosts or even the use of your tamers. So those are one of those aspects I'd like to talk about with the memory boost, effectively giving a higher consistency. Now, this really starts to become, I would argue, the most problematic is when we reach BT9, as BT9 introduced us many strategies that focus on us having to retrieve pieces. Now, this has already been something I've stated before, and then other people have talked about before, is that in BT9, we start to see a big meta shift as a lot of the power scaling went even higher than it was previously. We could see with BT7 and BT8, they really ramped up the speed of the game as they added different type of mechanics that allow the players to essentially accelerate to more aggressive levels, but also allow us and others to basically play at a more fast pace. We can see that with the hybrid decks that obviously start to outpace a lot of older decks, but we also start to see this when we reach BT8 with the release of the armor strategy, which is basically meant to be a more modified version of Champion Rookie Rush, and then also seeing the inclusions of more of the DNA evolutions that we were going to see going forward, as they allow us to basically accelerate up from level 4 to level 5, and then going to level 6 as a whole. Now, BT9 becomes a set with a lot of problems, based solely on the fact that the power scaling of a lot of the decks that were released was actually relatively high for the ones that have been meta contending. Now, the reason this is that a lot of the decks, since the BT9 set released the X antibodies and focused on the X support, we see cards like Cool Boy, and we also see cards like the X counterparts of many of the other strategies start to be very important as search pieces, because you need them to either gain the additional draws, because a lot of them were evil for zeros. But the thing that I believe made it more damaging was that it basically promotes this style of play where you need to get your pieces first before actually interacting with your opponent. Now, some people wouldn't do this anyways, and this is something that probably some people might disagree with, but I do believe that one of the problems when we got to X Record was that people realized it's best to just sit and wait, arguably, than just starting to chip away. Because a lot of times I would see people, they wouldn't even focus on chipping at their opponent anymore because there was no need to. You could at least keep the body on board for searching. Now, this would be in decks like Wargrey X and then Metal Guru X. Basically, if you played out the searchers, there was no reason to actually get rid of your searcher Digimon by chipping the security, because now with Agumon X, with Cool Boy, you now have a better way to access your stacks. And arguably the deck I think that benefited the most was actually going to be Why My Black Mary Boost, is one. I played X Antibody and I played obviously Alphamon. This deck was arguably the most powerful of the solitaire decks that I think existed at the time. And yeah, obviously we could tell that it did need a hit when they hit Doru Greymon, but it's what it really promoted. Now, a lot of times after I played the deck, and many people have played it, if you watch it, it's basically just the Alphamon players searching for their pieces. For the most part, you're not really doing anything with your opponent. You really just want to find what you need, set up, get into Oryuken, and just start swinging for basically game. And honestly, it's cool, but like it's very uninteractive. Like that's the key thing. It's not interactive, and it makes the memory boosts basically as their purpose is just search cards. They're not really meant to be the extra memory, because the memory does come up for high plays, but we're really focusing on the style where we use the memory boost for the search power. And arguably, this is something that doesn't go away. We're going to see in sets coming up that memory boosts are going to see different usages, as they're going to be fishing out more powerful cards, finding pieces you desperately need, and ultimately, memory boosts are here to stay. If I left anything out, if you guys want to leave a comment, this is all I really wanted to talk about, because I think memory boosts are awesome. I think them existing in the game is really useful. When I played Yu-Gi-Oh!, I think a lot of decks actually needed something similar to this. I don't mean like tier 1 decks, obviously. I mean like rogue decks that need some way to search. And we do have that kind of in the pot cards, but I think that if you print like a very like powerful card like this for a really bad deck, I think that's completely fine, because at least it allows it to be somewhat playable. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I think memory boosts are really cool. Also like that the memory boosts, besides the search power ones, have different effects that kind of help out, but they're not really as usable because the search will always be universally better. Well, that's all I've got to say today. As always, I'm signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.